Can a simple technical improvement rescue Ferrari from another disappointing year? Or are we seeing the beginning of the end for the Hamilton-Leclerc era in Maranello? The 2025 season has started with a bitter taste for Ferrari, far from the enthusiasm that surrounded the incorporation of Lewis Hamilton to his ranks. Maranello had generated a very high media expectation during the winter, fed by the promise of a competitive car, an elite pilot binomial, and a technical structure that, in theory, had learned from the mistakes of the past. However, with 6 races already disputed, the reality is another. The SF-25 has not lived up to the circumstances, and both in classification and in career rhythm has been constantly exposed in front of its most direct rivals, McLaren and Red Bull. The pressure on the Italian team has grown exponentially with each Grand Prize. The technical deficiencies of the SF-25 have left Ferrari not only without victories, but even without constant presence in the podium. In this context, the arrival of Emilia Romagna's Grand Prix represents more than a simple local career. It is the time where Ferrari must respond with concrete results. Competing at home at the Enzo E. Dino Ferrari Autodrome is to face with its history, its hobby, and the inheritance of its founder. But this time, that tradition is not a shield, but an uncomfortable mirror that reflects a team that is not fulfilling its legacy. The urgency is not measured only in lost points, but in the growing internal and external distrust. From engineers to sponsors, through the pilots themselves, the sensation is that Ferrari cannot afford another technical failure. Charles Leclerc, despite his experience and commitment, has shown visible frustration on more than one occasion. And Lewis Hamilton, newcomer but with the pressure to perform immediately, has already suggested that the adaptation process has been much more complex than expected. All this places the Imola GP as an emotional and competitive turning point. What is at stake is not only the standings, but the credibility of a project that promised to be revolutionary. Ferrari is caught between the need to deliver immediate results and fear of forced reconstruction in the middle of the season. The atmosphere in Maranello is tense, and the eyes of the world are put in what they achieve or fail to do in their most symbolic career. Because if they fail here, they will not only lose ground in the championship, but also something deeper: the confidence of the public in which Ferrari can still lead the present of Formula One, and not live exclusively from their past. The SF-25 was presented as a significant evolution regarding its predecessor, with emphasis on improving aerodynamic efficiency and curve stability. From the preseason tests, the data suggested a car capable of fighting in the upper part of the table. The incorporation of more aggressive solutions in the aerodynamic package, added to a renewed approach in the distribution of the weight and the general balance of the chassis, fed the hopes that Ferrari this time had found the correct key. However, as the first races advanced, expectations began to crumble in front of a raw reality. The car was fast only in very specific conditions and, in the rest, showed an alarming instability point. One of the most visible symptoms of bad design has been the way the car reacts during classification sessions. Both Leclerc and Hamilton have had to make constant corrections behind the wheel in high and medium speed curves, a clear imbalance signal between the front and the rear axle. This instability becomes even more evident when the tires are fresh, revealing that the problem is not only aerodynamic load, but how energy is transferred to the ground. Each onboard shows the pilots fighting the car, trying to keep the ideal draw while the SF-25 seems to resist being conducted to the limit. But beyond the surface, the true problem of SF-25 is structural. From the Melbourne Grand Prix, it was identified that the rear suspension of the car has a design defect that severely affects traction and stability. This ruling compromises the car's ability to maintain balance when it is required to the maximum, especially in medium traction areas, where the differential and suspension must work in perfect harmony. This failure not only complicates the passage through curve, but has also generated excessive wear on the flat background, as observed in Shanghai. Ferrari has tried to mitigate it with multiple configurations, but none has offered a definitive solution. The consequences of this defect are multiple. The tire wear has shot in demanding circuits, such as Miami, where the SF-25 behaved worse than its version of 2 years ago, despite having substantial improvements in the wind tunnel and a better DRS package. Even peak speed efficiency, one of the few strengths in the car, has not been enough to compensate for the general rhythm deficit in the race. The engineers have reached a critical point, where to adjust the car to improve one area implies sacrificing another. And when a team is trapped in this dilemma, the result is a car that can never be competitive in a sustained way. Ferrari arrives in Imola with an improvement package that does not represent only an evolution, but a total technical commitment to redefine the destination of the SF-25. Maranello's engineers have worked to implement solutions that go beyond traditional aerodynamic touch-ups. The main focus has been the correction of the rear suspension system, the origin of many of the instability problems that have gripped to the car in this seasonal start. The new configuration seeks to improve the absorption of energy in slow and medium curves, stabilize the car in acceleration phases, and reduce irregular wear of the flat soil, which has been a constant nightmare in the last large awards. In addition to the suspension, Ferrari has prepared changes in soil and diffuser design, critical areas in the generation of efficient aerodynamic load. These modifications aim to optimize the airflow under the car, stabilizing the aerodynamic pressure center and allowing more predictable behavior. Adjustments are also expected in the brake cooling system, after the thermal problems that have affected the consistency of the career rhythm. Together, these improvements do not simply seek to reduce the deficit by return, but to provide a car that pilots can squeeze without being on the edge of constant error. Imola is not the place where a bad update can be hidden. It is a circuit that requires surgical precision, where errors are paid expensive and where an unbalanced car is quickly evidenced. That is why Ferrari has chosen this path as the turning point. If the new technical package works here, it is likely to do so in many other scenarios. But if it fails, there will be no excuses. The margins in the modern Formula One are so narrow that any improvement must work from the first round of free practices. In this context, Emilia Romagna's GP represents not only an opportunity, but an urgent need for technical validation. The importance of these improvements is not limited to the competitive aspect. The morals of the team, media narrative, and institutional support are also at stake. Imola is an intense emotional load stage for Ferrari. Not only does it run, it is represented. Failing at home, in front of the fans, with a newly updated car and still without real response for Red Bull or McLaren, would be devastating. Therefore, the entire team has aligned their efforts so that this update is not only a change in pieces, but a change in the course of the championship. Because if Ferrari wants to continue in the 2025 conversation, he can't afford another false step. In this context, Ferrari not only runs against his rivals, runs against the clock. The pressure to stay competitive is not theoretical, it is tangible. The championship does not stop to wait for a team that still looks for how to make your car work. Each race without solid results is a less opportunity to close the gap with whom they have already capitalized their winter work. Mercedes, with a more refined W15 and a consolidated George Russell, has shown a rhythm consisting of technical clues, also adding to the fight for the podium. Even judges like Williams have surprised with outstanding individual actions, which makes Ferrari's absence even more noticeable at the top. The pressure also manifests from within. Lewis Hamilton, with all his experience and media weight, came to Ferrari to change the recent history of the team. However, he has discovered that the challenge is greater than anticipated. Although it has had positive moments of adaptation, it has not yet been able to show its best version due to the technical limitations of the SF-25. Charles Leclerc, on the other hand, has once again been the technical reference of the team, but his frustration accumulates with each session in which he cannot maximize the potential he knows he has. Both pilots need clear answers, not promises in the future. And in Imola, those answers must arrive through the stopwatch. The media environment and the Italian fans are not minor elements either. Ferrari is not any team. It is an institution that lives under the microscope of the press, of the sponsors, of the tifosi. The narrative in Italy changes from enthusiasm to fierce criticism in a matter of hours, and the margin of error is practically non-existent. If the improvements do not place the team in a position to compete for victory or at least the podium in their land, the emotional and reputational blow will be deep. Because in modern Formula One, success does not expect. And Ferrari, today more than ever, needs to stop running against himself. If the Ferrari improvement package fails in Imola, the consequences will go far beyond a bad result in the standings. The team faces a borderline situation in which another technical disappointment cannot be allowed. Failing in his house career would mean confirming that the SF-25 does not have a solid base on which to build real improvements, and that would call into question all the technical and strategic planning that began since the late 2023. The engineers would have to consider structural modifications in the medium term, which would mean weeks late with respect to their rivals and an almost safe renouncing any championship aspiration for this season. On the internal level, the pressure on the technical direction headed by Enrico Cardile and the sports management of Frédéric Vasseur would increase dramatically. The 2024 results had returned some credibility to Ferrari's management, but another concept error in the development of their car would again undermine the confidence in the project. Rumors about possible changes in the technical dome and team leadership could be intensified, especially if the Italian media environment, historically impatient, begins to demand forceful explanations. The institutional stability of the equipment could be staggered if it is not answered clearly and quickly. The personal dynamics within the team would also be at stake. Lewis Hamilton did not arrive to Ferrari to build from scratch, but to win and do it in a short term. If after half-season the car is still not competitive, the British could begin to question his decision to leave Mercedes. Although publicly maintains a constructive attitude, it is evident that frustration could translate into a loss of internal confidence. In the case of Charles Leclerc, the situation would be even more critical. He has been supporting the weight of leading a failed project for years, and another year without tangible results could accelerate his interest in listening to offers from other teams with more solid projects. At the external perception level, Ferrari also plays his status. In an era where technical competitiveness is more adjusted than ever, staying too long in the middle zone implies being out of the radar of the great technical signings, first-level sponsors, and the winning narrative that has so much weight in the modern F1. McLaren has shown that it is possible to move from contender to champion in less than a year with the right decisions. Ferrari, on the other hand, runs the risk of running in an eternal reconstruction if it does not obtain concrete results. And if Imola does not mark the turning point they expect, this 2025 may be remembered as another chapter in the long list of opportunities lost by the most historical sport of sport. Emilia Romagna's Grand Prix is not just another race in the calendar. For Ferrari, it represents a real moment. After weeks of frantic work in Maranello with simulations, data analysis and redesign in record time, the team arrives at their home in the hope of changing the course of a season that, until now, has been marked by frustration. Everything that has been prepared is about to test, and not anywhere, but in a circuit that defines its identity as a team. Imola does not allow misleading or excuses. If the car works, we will know immediately. And if not, in this maximum pressure scenario, Ferrari needs more than a technical improvement. You need to send a message to his hobby that they can still believe, to their rivals that they are not willing to surrender, and to their own pilots that they are building something solid and competitive. Because there is nothing more difficult in Formula One than to sustain hope when the results do not accompany. And yet, that is what this weekend represents. An opportunity to recover control, to rewrite the narrative, and to remember why Ferrari remains the heart of this sport, even when success resists arriving. But if they fail to take that step, if the improvements are not enough, Emilia Romagna's GP could become the point where it is confirmed that this project does not have the necessary basis to hold a winning season. And then, the decisions that are made later could define not only the course of Ferrari in 2025, but also the next years of its history in Formula One. The track will speak as it always does. And this time what I say will be definitive.